أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم به نستعين الحمد لله الذي جعل الحمد مفتاحا لذكره وسببا للمزيد من فضله ودليلا على آلائه وعظمته ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا له فداء أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم القارعة ما القارعة وما أدراك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك ما هي نار حامية صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Jamia Mu'mineen wa Mu'minat. First and foremost, I give my condolences to the Imam of our time, Imam Zaman, Ajj Faraj al-Sharif, and then I give my condolences to all of you on the occasion which we have come to commemorate, and that is the Shahadat of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi afdalu salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And our remembrance of Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam is perhaps one of the most important commemorations or remembrance of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and also after Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is because as those who follow the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam, we consider ourselves to be on madhab al-Ja'fari, that we are on the teachings of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. And that is because during his lifetime, which was kind of an extended lifetime as an Imam, when we look at the ages of the other Imam alayhim salatu wasalam at the time of their Shahadat, Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, based on two different riwayat, according to when his birth was, that either he was martyred at the age of 65 or either at the age of 68. So again, that duration of his life was quite a long span compared to other Imam alayhim salatu wasalam. But what that also, it gave Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam the opportunity to teach and to educate the ummah. It was, again, a revival of the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we can say that it began also with that of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi wasallam. As I've mentioned many times, that Imam Zain al-Abidin when he returned back to Medina after the event of Karbala, he said that there were not even 20 people who knew the haqq of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam. So Imam Zain al-Abidin, he began to forge this foundation, and we see it quite often through the du'as of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam. But if you also want to kind of look at those teachings of Imam Zain al-Abidin as a particular teacher, so again, refer back to the Risalat al-Huquq of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam, who he dictated this Risalat al-Huquq to Abu Hamza al-Thumali. And Abu Hamza al-Thumali, in the words of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, that he had a very high status. So Imam Zain al-Abidin, he began to lay this foundation so that Medina would become, once again, you could say the center of education for the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salatu wasalam. And after Imam Zain al-Abidin, Imam Muhammad Baqir, alayhi salatu wasalam, he began to lay that foundation as well, that he took on many students. In fact, there were several students who were the students of Imam Baqir, alayhi salatu wasalam, and also of Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam. Quite often we mention them as the students of Imam Sadiq, but if we really dig, we'll see that they also studied with Imam Baqir, alayhi salatu wasalam. For example, Abu Hanifa, he would also refer to Imam Baqir, alayhi salatu wasalam, in the lifetime of Imam Baqir. There are references where he was sitting and he's discussing with Imam Baqir, alayhi salatu wasalam. Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, also, as we mentioned, that reference of Abu Hanifa, again, he founded, again, this school of thought of fiqh. And we can see and we can trace basically almost every school of thought of fiqh back to Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, because he was the teacher of, again, two of the major founders of those schools of thought, Abu Hanifa and also Malik ibn Anas. And then Shafi'i is a student of Malik ibn Anas, and then Hanbali is a student of Shafi'i. So it traces back to Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam. He is the one who set that foundation, and of course, built on top of the teachings of Imam Baqir, alayhi salatu wasalam, on top of the teachings of Imam Zain al-Abidin, alayhi salatu wasalam. And in face of Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, and it's very important for us to understand this idea and what the Ahlul Bayt, alayhi salatu wasalam, in general went through, but also particularly what Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, went through in order to present us with this school of thought, which is on the teachings of Rasulullah. It is connected to the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that revelation. In fact, even Malik ibn Anas and Abu Hanifa, when they said, although they differed in their kind of perception and understanding of what they wrote, but when they spoke about Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, again, they spoke very highly of him. Okay? For example, Malik ibn Anas, he says, yes, we would, if we wanted to recite something from the Quran, yes, we will make wudu. He says, but Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, even if he was narrating a hadith of Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he would be in wudu. He would make sure that he's in wudu. So when we come and we remember the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salatu wasalam, whether we are celebrating their birth or we're commemorating their Shahadat, it is a moment that we need to learn about the life of Ahlul Bayt. Educate ourselves of what they have taught us. In fact, when we recite the ziyarat of Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, one part of that ziyarah, we say, Assalamu alayka, ya sahib al-hujaj wa-dalalat. Peace and salutations be upon you, the one who had hujjah, who had proof. In other words, that whatever the Imam did, whatever the Imam said, he had proof for it. In fact, he would challenge people. He says that if I've said something to you, ask me where it is in the Quran. Ask me where it is in the Quran. He said, and I'll show you in the Quran. That's exactly what I said. He had the dalil, he had the proof. Assalamu alayka ya sahib al-barahin al-wadihat. Again, barahin is also a proof, one of the strongest of proofs, at least when we study in the house of this idea of mantiq. There are different levels of proofs. One is called burhan. In fact, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he challenged people, he says, if you think there are more gods than me, there's more than one God. He says, hatu burhanukum in kuntum sadiqin. Bring your burhan. What is your strongest of proof? So Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, we call him ya sahib al-barahin al-wadihat. He had very clear and strong proof and evidence. So, and again, this is one of the things that Imam Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, he's teaching us. That, when we come, when we participate in Majlis, not just simply, we hear the praises of Ahlul Bayt, but we learn nothing from the Ahlul Bayt. This is why Imam Sadiq alayhi also as well, he said that if he saw the shabab, if he saw the youth, or he saw among his Shia that someone who is not studying, not educating themselves, and not understanding what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran, what is the Sirat and the Sunnah of Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdhalu salam, he says that, if they wouldn't take it wrong, he says, I would whoop them, I would punish them, I would reprimand them until they begin to learn. This is the importance that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he placed on knowledge, understanding. And if we say that we are Ja'fari, part of that Ja'fari, we are associating ourselves with Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So it means that we have to come and we have to understand our deen. And the way Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he presents this deen, this way of life, a very beautiful way of life. And I'll give you one example, inshallah, try to establish it also with those dala'il, those proofs, those evidence, that burhan which Imam Sadiq alayhi himself, he brings forth. And one of those things which is beneficial for us, and that is in our life, in our households, and how to, again, we establish a wholesome home. And this advice is for the men of the house that Imam Sadiq alayhi he gives. He says, إِنَّ الْمَرَأَ يَحْتَاجُ إِلَى ثَلَاثِ خِصَالٍ. He says a man, again, that had a household, needs 3 khisal. And of course, when we understand these traits and these qualities that Imam Sadiq alayhi he mentions, although he's speaking to the men, but also there's, you could say, an equal or a receptive component on the other side as well, meaning from you wives. He says, يَتَكَلَّفُهَا وَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ مِنْ طَبْعِهِ ذَلِكَ. Subhanallah. And listen to the advice that Imam Sadiq he gives. He says that these 3 traits a man should have. He needs these traits, these qualities. وَيَتَكَلَّفُهَا إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ مِنْ طَبْعِهِ. He says that, well, some people, they may naturally have these qualities that he's going to point out. He says some people may not have those qualities. And if they don't have those qualities, then they need to make effort. Yatakallaf from taklif. Go make the efforts. Learn these qualities, learn these traits in order to, again, to build a solid household. Because when that household is solid, what happens? The community becomes strong. When the community is strong, what happens? The society becomes strong. The nation becomes strong. Becomes a wholesome society. And so what are these 3 traits that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that a man has to have? The first trait, he says, ma'ashiratun jamila. Ma'ashiratun jamila. Yeah, that this individual, the man, he has to have a beautiful life, a good life. In other words, his mu'ashara means interaction. And again, this is why I said it has 2 parts to it. If you read the Arabic, ashara means that interaction. In other words, it should be from both sides. And if it's not from both sides, at least the man should have and be the one who is leading. Mu'asharatun jamila. That's living in a beautiful way, in a nice way. Such that even if someone is treating you wrong, what do? You respond with goodness. And we find this in the life of Imam Sadiq alayhi. And this is also one of the things that repelled Mansur al-Dawanaki from actually even martyring the Imam in his presence, or martyring the Imam himself, or killing the Imam himself. Imam was called to Mansur al-Dawanaki about 7 times. And even in several of those times, Mansur al-Dawanaki, he would actually draw his sword, pull his sword out, as if he was going to, okay, well, this is the day I'm going to kill the Imam, kill Ja'far ibn Muhammad. But then he would put that sword in. One, yes, the dua of Imam Sadiq alayhi, but also the way that the Imam, he interacted. That He didn't have that, you could say, that dra. He didn't have the nerve. He couldn't muster up the nerve to kill the Imam with his own hands. And that's why he sent poison to him. That, okay, well, somebody else do it. Or, yes, from my command, my order, this is going to happen. But again, he didn't have, and if you're going to take the life of something, so, you have to have this rujula, this chivalry, this manhood. It's not like, oh, hey, I'm going to push this button, and so many people are going to die. Again, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afusatu wasalam, and we know this from Imam Hussein. Imam Ali alayhi afusatu wasalam, that if they're going to engage with someone, yes, they'll stand face to face. Start pushing of the button, oh, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to send some poison dates or these type of things. So, mu'asharatun jamila. And of course, one of the beautiful things that Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam, he talks about this mu'ashara jamila, and I was going to recite the Arabic of it because the Arabic is so beautiful, but I'll just give you the gist of what Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam, he stated, that we can understand that, well, how do we implement this beautiful lifestyle, this generous and this good lifestyle interaction with others? So Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam, when he's talking to Abdullah ibn Jundab, one of the well-known companions and students of Imam Sadiq, he tells him, he says, listen, he says, think about water, reflect on water. And this is how we can begin to live this. He says, فكر في الماء, think about water, about the purity of water, the safa of water, the tahura, that how water is pure, the barakat that we gain from water. And he says, and then how water flows with everything. Again, you put water on a flat surface, what happens? It flows out, everything. You put it in a bowl, it flows with the shape of the bowl. You put it in a glass, it's going to flow with the shape of the glass. Then he says, imzij. He says to interact, he says, Ashra khalqallah ta'ala ka imzija il-ma'i bil-asha. He says, and interact with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way that water flows with everything. You have a flat surface, you put a glass here, you pour water on it. What happens? The water flows and it goes around the glass, it works with the glass. So he says, live like this with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is that mu'ashara jamila. And at the foundation of that mu'ashara jamila, again, I'm really condensing this because we don't have time, is what? Gratitude. To be grateful. That however you interact with someone, again, see, okay, well, what can you be grateful about in that interaction with this person? Water gets hot, does it not? Water boils, but what happens at the water, again, it comes back cool, right? If it boils, it can burn, but when it cools down, it can be nice and cool. It can be easy. SubhanAllah, the way that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afusatu, they teach us. So beautiful. The second quality that one should have, as Imam Sadiq alayhi afusatu, he says, Sa'atin bitaqdirin, to be generous within the bounds, and this is why I translate it. So within the bounds of, you could say, financial literacy. Sa'atin bitaqdirin. In other words, that if you're in your household, because he says, fi manzilihi. These are the qualities that a person should have. Fi manzilihi wa iyalihi. So when he's interacting in his home, when he's interacting with his family, so have sa'atin bitaqdirin. So yes, you are generous, you're kind. But that generosity and that kindness, it has parameters as well. Bitaqdiran. Has limitations. Doesn't mean that one is so stingy that then their family doesn't benefit. If they have some extra barakah, again, that water has what? As Imam Sadiq says, remember the barakah of water. Water spreads. So be generous within the bounds. Again, don't be wasteful that, oh, well, hey, I've spent everything, now we're in difficulties. But no, generosity within the parameters of financial literacy. That means that every head of household needs to understand and learn these aspects of financial literacy, which inshallah we can speak about that in some other time. But one of the most beautiful things about this kind of concept and this idea is how the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he would say that the most purest of income, atyabul kasb, he says the most purest of income is that which a person earns, or a Muslim earns, again with his hands, his efforts, his or her efforts. Those efforts which also Imam Sadiq alayhi hafidh, he points to, he says that Amir al-Mu'mineen in his life, he says he freed 1,000 mamlukin, thousands of people who were servants, who were in debt, indigenous servants. He bought them and he freed them. Bikaddi yadi, not from Baytul Mal. Imam Sadiq, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he went, he worked, and he earned, and he did to do what? To help others, to free others, to get them out of debt. This is the best of earning. But again, it needs that financial literacy. It needs to understand it. Okay, well, how do I spend so that we're benefiting, but also not doing israf? That financial literacy that also we see in the life of Imam Sadiq alayhi hafidh, and it comes at a point where someone tried to criticize Imam Sadiq alayhi hafidh when they saw him wearing a very nice kaba and nice abba. He says, oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he had holes in his abba and he would patch them, he'd patch his shoes. Imam Sadiq alayhi hafidh, he says, yes, that was for that time. He says, because that was the level of what people lived at that time. He says, so I have to live at the median level of what people are at now. So yes, he dressed well in public. He dressed well when he was at home with his wives. As one person came to visit Imam Sadiq alayhi hafidh when he was at one of the homes of his wives, and when they came, Imam Sadiq, he had a very nice dress on, very nice thobe. And he told the person, he says, come back in about half an hour, after some time, about an hour. So he came back, Imam Sadiq alayhi hafidh greeted him at another door. And when he saw Imam Sadiq had very meek and humble clothes on. And this person was like, so when I saw you earlier, you were dressed so nicely. He says, what is this? Why are you like this? What is this duplicity? Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu, he says, no. He says, when you came the first time, I was at the home of my wife. And it is her haqq that I look presentable in her presence. He says, now you've come. He says, this is my room. This is my room where I spend my time, alone time to myself. He says, and here, it's just me and Allah, and I dress in the most humble of fashions. Why? Because I'm before Allah. So it was the right of his wife. Oh, look nice, look presentable. Don't look shabby. This is, again, that sa'atin bitaqdeer. So to be generous within the bounds of financial literacy. And that last aspect that Imam Sadiq alayhi hafidh, he says that a man needs in his home and with his family, he says, ghiratun bitahassun. Ghiratun bitahassun. So my translation of this is to have chivalry that is focused on protection. Ghira, which is part of the iman of a man, according to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And a number of our imam alayhim afsad, they've said this. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi afsad, he says it also in Nahju Balagha. Al-ghiratu iman. Imanu rajul, or min al-iman lirajul. So that the ghira, to have this chivalry, have this sense of protection, have this sense of, and it's almost a sense of jealousy, that you don't want anyone to harm your family. your wives, your daughters, your women folk, your sister, to have that ghira as part of the iman for a man, but not for a woman. Why? Because that ghira, as Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi hafizatu wasalam, he says that what is the purpose of that? Bitahassunin, to protect them from harm. It's not the woman, she protects the man from harm. It is the man who protects his household from harm. And it's not meant to put a woman in a trap or to take away their rights or anything like that. And this is why also in one of the cases where someone was using this in the wrong way, they were like, oh, well, my wife has to stay home, and so she wanted to go to a majlis of other women to recite the Quran. And Imam Sadiq heard about this, that her husband stopped her. And he says, why? He says, that's not ghira. That's not what is intended from ghira. Again, look at the focus of Imam Sadiq. He said, she's going to a place where she's going to read the Quran. She's going to learn about her deen. You don't protect her from learning from her deen. You don't stop her from learning from her deen. Yes, if on that path there's some sort of harm, then yes, you go with her to protect her. Or if you're not able to go with her to protect her, then yes, it's okay, well, don't go, because in the way there's some harm. And I can't protect you for that harm at this moment or at the time that you want to go, and so you prevent them. Ghira bit-tahassun. Not just simply, hey, I have control. No, there's a purpose for that. And that is protection. And that is something that we see also in the lifetime of Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi wasalam. That before Mansur al-Dawaniqi, he had poisoned the Imam. He ordered the house of Imam Sadiq alayhi wasalam to be put on fire. Imam Sadiq alayhi wasalam, they said that when the house was on fire, Imam Sadiq himself, he was running from room to room trying to put out the fire. There were others who were trying to help. They said that when the fire was finally put out, Imam Sadiq alayhi wasalam, he said he sat on his side, he began to weep, he began to cry. That one of the companions came to Imam Sadiq alayhi wasalam. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, ليست هذا أول مرة. That, oh, son of Rasul, this is not the first time that your home was set on fire. Especially, this was not the first time that in Medina that the house of the Ahlul Bayt was set on fire. He says, so why are you crying? This is something that happened. Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, yes, I know. He know very well that which house was set on fire in Medina, the house of Fatima. But his thoughts were somewhere else. He says, رأيت نسائي وبناتي يتراكضن في الدار من حجرة إلى هجرة ومن مكان إلى مكان. He says, I saw my women that they were running from room to room, from one place to the other, that as the fire it was blazing upon the house. هذا وأنا معهن فتذكرت عيال جدي الحسين يوم عاشوراء. He says, as they were running from place to place, he says, then I began to remember the family of my grandfather, the family of al-Hussein, on the day of Ashura. لما هجم القوم عليهن والمنادي ينادي احرقوا بيوت الظالمين. He says that when the enemies, they came forth and they said to burn the houses, burn these tents of the enemies, burn these tents of the zalimeen, of the oppressors. They were actually the oppressors, but they said burn these homes. ولم يكن معهم رجل يساعدهم والإمام زين العابدين مريض. He says that they were running too from place to place, from tent to tent. There was no man to help them. Imam Hussein, he had become shaheed. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, that he was the one who was going to protect Zainab. He told Zainab that if anything happens, Ya ukhay, ya ukhti, oh my sister, I will protect you. But there was no Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, there was no Ali al-Akbar, there was no Qasim, there was no men folks that helped him. Imam Zain al-Abidin, he was also sick. He was not able to help them. So Imam Sadiq, he says, I remember that moment and I weep for that. He says, I weep for that moment that they had no one. But how lucky also Imam Sadiq was that when he finally succumbed to the poison of Mansur Dawanaki, that he had Imam al-Musa al-Kadhim ala jambi, close to him, that when Imam Sadiq, when it was time for his ghusl, when it was time for his kafan, when it was time for his dafan, and Imam Musa al-Kadhim was there. But again, Jadduhu al-Hussein, baqiya thalath, that he remained 3 days on the plains of Karbala. No one there to give him dafn, no one there to take care of the bodies of the Shahadat. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu wa munqalibi yanqalibun. Fatima Hussein.
قاسم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر کا جنازہ، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر کا جنازہ، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں ہائے حسین کہہ کر آنسو بہا رہے ہیں، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر کا جنازہ، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر کا جنازہ، تابوت کو اٹھا کر جتنے قدم بڑھائے، ہر ایک قدم پہ ان کو سجاد یاد آئے، عابد کی بے بسی کا نوحہ سنا رہے ہیں، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر کا جنازہ، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر، نکلا دہن سے باہر ہائے جگر جو کٹ کر خون رنگ ہو گیا تھا، مولا کا میرے بیستر منظر یہ اہل دل کے دل کو دکھا رہے ہیں، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر کا جنازہ، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں، حیدر سے دشمنی یہ اب تک نہیں رکی ہے، مولا حسن سے لے کر جعفر تک آ گئی ہے، ہر ایک چراغ زہرا ظالم بجھا رہے ہیں، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر کا جنازہ، کاظم اٹھا رہے ہیں جعفر کا جنازہ، بر محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم۔
Yeah, so thank you everyone for attending. We